Alright everybody, so I wanted to show you this clip here to show you some of the weaknesses with this build. I'm primarily using the bolt driver in this fight, and it's because this boss has no weak spots, so enjoy.
This is it.
Alright, so let's go ahead and jump on over to the build. Now the focus of this build is weak spot damage, and that's because I'm using the Savior, and I've tried to make it work several ways. I'm really not a huge fan of weak spot dependent builds in general, just because they're weak spot dependent. I'm a much bigger fan of crit damage builds instead of weak spot, but the Savior just really favors weak spot damage. So I put together a weak spot build. I've got two different amulets I use. I'll show you both and I'll explain why here in just a moment. So jumping on over to the archetypes, I am running Hunter as the primary and Gunslinger as the secondary, with Hunter Shroud as the active skill for Hunter and Bulletstorm as the active skill for my Gunslinger. On over to the armor, I'm running the Fey Royal Headcover, the Void Carapace, the Fey Royal Greaves, and then the Labyrinth Gauntlets. It's not super important for this build, I just like the look, so that's what I'm running for this one. And then for the Relic, once again, I am running the Shielded Heart with range damage, range crit damage, and weak spot damage, just trying to pump those single shots as much as possible. And over to the weapons. Now, the sidearm is actually important for this build as well. I am running the Savior, which is the gun that you get for beating the game on hardcore, if anybody wants to know where to get it. And I'm running the Ghost Shell Mutator on here, where after 3 consecutive weak spot hits, increase the damage of the next weak spot hit by 50%, and then at level 10, I'm getting an increased weak spot critical chance by 15%. Now, I've tried different mutators on here. I really like the Ghost Shell because I feel like it just pumps that weak spot damage, and that's what I'm going for. I'm not looking to expand my magazine. I'm not looking to shoot faster. I'm just looking for those big red numbers with this build. And then over to the secondary, I'm using the Bolt Driver, and I actually think it's pretty important for this build as well. There's going to be some scenarios where you can't use the Savior effectively, and that's because there's a lot of enemies that don't have weak spots. So the Bolt Driver with this build, it's just going to put out a lot of consistent DPS and allow you to tear through some enemies you'd have a really hard time with otherwise. I'm running the Corrosive Rounds mod on it with the Supercharger Mutator just to pump that attack speed further. Over to the Amulet. Now this is where I swap between two. The Ankh of Power is really reliable because it's giving you that 15% increase to all damage, and then when you consume a relic like with Shielded Heart, it's going to double that bonus, and with a relic like Shielded Heart where you're doing it preemptively, it's actually really useful. You're going to get that 30% damage bonus. The other one that I've been using on occasion, depending on where I am, is this Core Booster, which increases weak spot damage by 50% for 10 seconds after killing an enemy. Now this is super specific. It's really good against bosses that have both weak spots and adds for you to shoot. If you don't have some sort of add to kill and a weak spot, this is fairly worthless to you when fighting a boss. Over to the rings, I am running Zania's Malice for that increased weak spot damage, the Probability Cord for that increased crit damage, and the Ring of Flawed Beauty. Now this one is not necessarily crucial for the build. I just like it because I'm pumping that weak spot damage. So we're getting an extra 25% weak spot damage, but we're reducing range damage by 15% when not hitting a weak spot. So it's kind of a give and take here. I just really like it for this specific build. And then the final ring here, I've got the Archer's Crest, which is going to decrease that weapon charge time by 25%, which I think on the Savior is super important. Just because it has such a long charge time, this build doesn't really work super well without it. Over to the traits, I've got long shot and ammo reserves coming from Hunter and Gunslinger. I'm running Swiftness for the 15% move speed, Regrowth for that 1.5 health regen per second. I've got 9 points in Strong Back, which is allowing me to keep my weight at 50. I've got Full Vigor for the health. I've got Spirit for the mod power generation. Now this is also quite important because the Savior has a really long reload time. So instead of reloading it to get damage out faster, what you can do is drain the magazine and activate the mod, and the mod activation time will refill that clip, and it's much quicker than a reload. I've got Expertise, reducing your skill cooldowns, because both the Hunter and Gunslinger skill are very important for keeping your DPS up. And then Footwork for increased movement speed while aiming by 45%. It allows me to kind of dodge projectiles while I'm aiming. And then I've got the 2 endurance points coming naturally as well. And that's actually it for this build. The melee weapon's not super important. I've tested a few variations here. I've had some fun with it. I enjoy seeing the big red numbers. I really can't say that Savior is the best weapon out there. I just wanted to put a build together for it because it's such a challenging weapon to get your hands on. I really think if you're going to go for a build of this sort, a bow would be better, but this seems to be about the best I can do with the Savior. So, take that with a grain of salt, do your own testing, have some fun with it, let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.